Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy and I welcome you to my session on literary criticism and theory. Before proceeding further, let me make this clear that this is a specialized session specifically designed for the MEG learners. Hence, all the aspects discussed here will be solely based on the MEG 5 official study material. In our previous sessions, we have been discussing some of the most relevant contemporary literary theories such as postmodernism, psychoanalysis, post-colonialism, etc. Today, we will focus our attention towards the beginnings of cultural studies and new historicism. Dear learners, this topic falls under Unit 5 of Block 8 of your official IGNOU study material for MEG 5.
Cultural studies is an academic discipline which combines political economy, communication, sociology, social theory, literary theory, media theory, film studies, cultural anthropology, philosophy, art, history, criticism, etc. In short, almost anything related to culture to study cultural phenomena in various societies. So, cultural studies is an academic discipline that intends to study cultural phenomena in various societies. These days, cultural studies research are into vogue. Cultural studies research often focuses on how a particular phenomenon relates to matters of ideology, nationality, ethnicity, social class, gender, and many more. So this would serve as an introduction. You just need to have an understanding. So if you focus towards Unit 5, the basic objectives. Cultural studies and new historicism both mark a sociological turn in literary studies. Now you would be wondering what new historicism is. New historicism is simply a critical approach. When did this develop? This developed in the 1980s. It is quite recent. So this developed in the writings of a well-known new historian. His name is Stephen Greenblatt. Okay, his name is mentioned in the textbook. You just have to listen to an introduction. So, new historicism is characterized by a parallel reading of the text with its socio-cultural and historical conditions, which forms the core test. That is, we study new criticism that views a text as an autotelic entity. But the new historicists clearly reject the fundamental tenets of new criticism. In short, you can remember it as an opposite of new criticism. So that is new historicism. Cultural studies I already let you know. So cultural studies and new historicism both mark a sociological turn in literary studies. So the sociological concerns were always there in literary studies, but these two trends bring them to the foreground. That is, more emphasis was given. As I mentioned in my previous lectures on contemporary literary theories, these theories are very vast, but we will have to limit our discussion towards what is mentioned in our official study material. So in this unit, I'll give you some idea of the beginnings of these two trends, that is cultural studies and new historicism, with focus on the work of Raymond Williams and the Birmingham Center. Do not be under the impression that cultural studies is just about these things. No, not at all. It is a very vast field, but due to the syllabus, we will have to restrict our discussion towards these few notions. And later we will also look at the work of Stephen Greenblatt, in particular new historicism. So just have this idea in mind that the Victorian writer and critic Matthew Arnold, T.S. Eliot and F.R. Lewis, these are new critics. So these critics in the 20th century have also been cultural critics. They were also renowned as culture critics, I quote unquote. But our focus here is on cultural materialism, a concept that has been inaugurated by Raymond Williams. So who was Raymond Williams, if you are wondering? Have you heard of this name before? Raymond's, not the brand. We are referring to Raymond Williams. In Marxism, we must have mentioned this name at some point. So Raymond Williams is basically a Welsh, I should say, was basically a Welsh socialist writer, academic, novelist, and also a well-known critic. One of the most notable idea put forth by Raymond Williams is none other than cultural materialism. A piece of trivia, he has a well-renowned student. So Terry Eagleton was a student of Raymond Williams. That's a piece of trivia. So I'll just introduce this concept of cultural materialism to you. Remember, you don't have to go into the depths, for your syllabus doesn't mention this. But cultural materialism can be traced to be a theoretical movement. It emerged in 1980s. With the new historians. Remember, I told you, new historicism also evolved at around 1980s. So, cultural materialism was put forth by whom? Raymond Williams. And Williams viewed culture as a productive process. For Raymond Williams, the study of literature of any age would reflect the dominant values of that society. So hence cultural materialism, it became one of the most discussed concepts put forth by Raymond Williams. So we'll go into the details of Raymond Williams when we discuss the next section, that is the beginning of cultural studies. Before that, let's focus on what is mentioned as part of introduction to this unit. The Birmingham Center of Cultural Studies concerned itself with contemporary English reality and cultural forms, including film and mass media. New historicism focused more on the Renaissance with special attention to drama. So our textbook mentions the foreword to the book Political Shakespeare, published in 1985, edited by Jonathan Dollimore and Alan Sinfield. So who are these people? Dollimore was basically a British philosopher and critic. No, Dollimore is basically a British philosopher and critic in the field of Renaissance literature, gender studies, queer theory, history of ideas, and cultural theory. I mean queer theory. Q-U-E-E-R, queer theory. Okay. At the same time, Alan Sinfield, the co-editor, he is an English theorist in the field of Shakespeare and sexuality, same queer theory, queer studies, cultural theory, and many more. So this book helps us to place these developments of cultural studies and new historicism in a much better perspective. Dollimore tells us that this term, cultural materialism, put forth by Raymond Williams, this term is borrowed from Raymond Williams, and that its practice grows from a body of work in Britain in the post-war period, which can be broadly characterized as cultural analysis. So this thing that we are studying, the beginnings of cultural studies, this is not so difficult to understand. This is just history. What happened during the initial phases of cultural studies. So you just need to understand. There is no much great concepts like what we study in the other theories to understand. A new historicism would have a few. So this is more like some history that you need to remember. So the cultural critics, what did they want to achieve? The cultural critics wanted to break the boundary between high and popular culture and the hierarchy that implies. So the cultural critics are also critical of the idea of a canon. Now comes the question, what do you mean by canon? Literary canon? It refers to a set of texts that serve as a recognized standard of stylistic quality, cultural or social significance, and intellectual value. In simple terms, these are texts that are regarded as good works or good literature, or say classics. So what he opines, that is, what the cultural critics opine is that instead of evaluating what is great, they wish to relate a literary text to its cultural context. That is, just relating a text to its cultural context was what they focused upon. Now comes a very notable name, Foucault. You must have heard of Foucault. He was a strong influence on cultural critics as well as the new historicists. So Foucault was a French philosopher, historian, and a literary critic. He refused to see power as something exerted by the oppressor on the oppressed. Instead, he saw it as a complex of forces. Earlier discussions were made of power as of something that was exerted on somebody by someone. That is, the oppressor exerts power on the oppressed, but Foucault gave it a totally different dimension. That is, he saw it as if a complex of forces, ways of thinking, speaking, etc. So Foucault is also important for focusing on the histories of women, the minorities, and other marginalized persons in the study of culture. He has also contributed immensely to the beginnings of queer theory. What do you mean by queer theory? That is an umbrella term for the LGBTQ, and studies based on that include the queer studies. So, New Historicism specifically was more concerned with the interaction between state power and cultural forms in Renaissance. Remember, Renaissance critics were there. So, theatre came to be seen as prime location for the representation and legitimation of power. Theatre was important. Lately, New Historicism has come to cover a wide range of approaches to the study of literature and also history. So, we can say that New Historicism was indeed a reaction to the excesses of deconstruction, and New Historicism in a way brought back the form from the free-floating signified to the dynamics of power. Yeah, you can just understand the key concepts here. There is considerable overlap between the concerns of cultural critics and New Historicists. Hence, we have grouped these together for our study. And remember Greenblatt? Yeah, according to him, New Historicism involves, I quote, an intensified willingness to read all the textual traces of the past with the attention traditionally conferred only on literary texts. I unquote. Now, section 5.2 discusses the beginnings of cultural studies. So, the Center for Cultural and Community Studies was set up in Birmingham. So, this is the Birmingham School. So, it was set up in 1964, and there are two notable figures who were associated with the Birmingham School. If you have heard of Hogarth and Hall, you would have much clarity. I am not very sure whether you have heard about them. Richard Hogarth and Stuart Hall. So, I'll give an explanation on who they were. So, Richard Hogarth was an English academician. His career covered the fields of English literature, obviously cultural studies, with emphasis on British popular culture, sociology, and much more. Whereas Stuart Hall was a Jamaican-born British Marxist sociologist, cultural theorist, and also a very active political activist. So there is the seminal book titled The Uses of Literacy. Never forget this title. This book is written by Hogarth, Richard Hogarth, and it is this particular book that gave cultural studies a working class orientation. So he read everyday working class life, customs and habits as though they were literary texts. So Raymond Williams' phrase culture is ordinary is at heart of such a working class orientation. We will look at that later. So before looking at some crucial ideas of Raymond Williams, let's briefly look at some of the ideas put forth by another theoretician. His name is Hebditch. Full name is Dick Hebditch. He was a theorist of subculture. So that itself is the name of one of his books, Subculture, with the subtitle The Meaning of Style, published in 1979. So this particular book, Subculture, The Meaning of Style, concerns itself with the interconnected worlds of music, fashion, youth in the post-war period, especially the distinctive forms of clothing, speech and music that characterize groups like the punks, like the new gen there. So his interest was in the way young men and women resisted their assigned social roles through rituals of dress, dance, music. So for those men and women, these dress, dance and music were aspects through which they resisted their social jobs assigned to them. So your text provides some extracts from Subculture, The Meaning of Style. Due to limitations of our time in academic counseling, I wouldn't be able to explain that. You may read when you get time. Now I'll help you with the basic aspects of Hebditch. That is, he sees science as just so much graffiti on the whole, but to him graffiti itself can make fascinating reading. You get much clarity if you read that paragraph mentioned here. So what his book Subculture tries to do is to decipher the graffiti, to erase out the meaning embedded in various post-war youth styles. Remember, post-war youth styles. Alright, now let's focus our attention towards Raymond Williams. Shall we? Are you there? Good. So one of his famous concepts is the structures of feeling. I'll help you with that. So his was a challenge to cultural elitism from within the tradition of English criticism. Raymond Williams stresses on lived actuality or on social experience in solution. Marxism and Literature is one of the most celebrated works of Raymond Williams. You must have heard about it. So there he stresses on the aspect of social life, social experience in solution. That aspect you need to underline and understand. Meanings and values actually possess a great value in Williams' scheme of things. He attributes great value to meanings. So if you look at your study material, page number 31 provides you some abstracts from The Long Revolution, another work by Raymond Williams. So what Williams called the living result of all the elements in this organization is precisely what gets reflected in his phrase structure of feeling. So I'll explain this phrase structure of feeling. Just give me a minute. So structures of feeling. So Williams' concern is more with forming and formative processes than with fixed explicit forms. So a structure of feeling is actually concerned with meanings. As I told you, meanings and values are of great importance to Raymond Williams and his concepts. So meanings and values as they are lived and felt are always in the process of forming and reforming. A structure of feeling is concerned with meanings and values as they are lived and felt and are always in the process of forming and reforming. So social experience and solution, the lived actuality, all those are stressed upon. The phrase structure of feeling names the thoughts and feelings of a representative generation and is indicative of a very deep and wide possession. You can say that it follows from this that a new generation will shape its response to changed circumstances in a changed structure of feelings. So now we will focus our attention towards the beginnings of new historicism that that falls under section 5.3 of your official study material.